All right. Okay, so we have multiple items on the agenda this afternoon. We should easily get through all of those in plenty of time, and we'll have some time for questions and answers as we go through as well. But we're going to kick off with Emily and a bond update.
And she's doing Remind as well.
And I'm going to do Remind as well. All right. Good morning, or I guess afternoon. Happy Monday, everybody. So quick update on our 2018 bond program. So as you guys may know, we just had our groundbreakings here at North Salem as well as Gubser Elementary. Those were a lot of fun. We had some golden shovels and just really great time to celebrate the new events going on throughout the bond program. We do have our next one scheduled at McNary, which will be on May 17th at 9:30. And then Judson and Waldo are still to be determined on those, but those will happen soon as well. Design teams for the 2020 cohort of projects have just started to meet. So McKay and South are currently on their way, and Auburn and Hoover are just about getting started. That's actually part of the reason why Mike's not here this afternoon. He's actually at the design meeting for Auburn, so that's getting all started. But if you're curious about any of the bond projects going on throughout the entire program, those are all listed on our website on the bond projects page. You can find the timeline, all the details about what's included in each project. So lots of exciting stuff there. And then a week from today, actually, our Community Bond Oversight Committee is going to be holding their next meeting, which will be held on April 22nd. So that's all I have for bond. Does anybody have any bond questions or anything related to the bond program? All right, great. So now we're just going to switch gears a little bit, just that way you guys don't have to listen to me talk for too long. But as you guys know, we did just roll out Remind with all of our schools, and it's available for all of our district educators. And so just to kind of get a sense, how many of you guys are currently using Remind in your schools or with any of your students? All right, so just one. So that's kind of a perfect example of how it's not fully rolled out yet. We're not pushing this to be used right now, but it should be used as a supplemental. So we encourage you guys to get in there, start playing with it. Remind is a great resource to start using for supplemental communication. So think of how we still have School Messenger, which can be used great for emergency messages and things, but if you have an upcoming event or other things or at the classroom level that may not be as an urgent message, it's a great place to send a text or do those things through there, just because it puts communication where our students and families are. And so if it's not that thing where they have to get that call right away, that's a great resource for you guys to use. So since you are currently using Remind, what would you say is your favorite feature that you've used Remind for? Have you ever used it?
It's used in our school, so a lot of our teachers use it to contact parents and communicate back and forth. I just got it as office manager, and I'm really excited because I think it's going to open up a lot of avenues in the office as far as sending things out to parents and communicating.
Yeah, and speaking for OMs, we did just open it up because we realized when we first rolled it out, OMs didn't have the access to send school-wide messages. So now all of our OMs should have access to be able to send those messages. And this is part of a big collaboration between us, the Coalition for Equality, as well as the education associations who have really supported this work to help continue to build relationships with our students and families, communicate where they are, and allow for easy translation to allow that two-way communication in a way that we don't currently have throughout the district. So just let you guys know, we don't currently have professional development scheduled between now and the end of the school year because we want to be cognizant of all your guys' schedules and everything you guys have to get done between now and the end of the school year. So just look for that as we move closer into the upcoming school year. Question?
Is there a how-to guide on Remind? I know I saw the frequently asked questions, but not the how-to.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have a how-to, and that's part of the things that we're working currently on with Remind on, because a lot of the resources they have are actually for the free plan that you can text in the codes, and it's not as robust built out currently through the district-wide plan that we currently have, and we have a lot more access to features that aren't currently in their current resources. So we're working on those, but if you come across things you're like, I don't know how I'm doing this, if you contact our department, the Community Relations Department, we can get those questions in and work on developing resources that are catered to what our educators are actually questioning and having things on. So we encourage you, if you have any questions, shoot ourselves or the Community Relations Office an email, or reach out to TIS and open a ticket about any issues you guys could be having. And then another thing to keep in mind is, as we're moving into the next school year, is we want to really work on developing Remind to fit the needs of our students and families. So if you're coming across something you're like, I really wish Remind had the access to do this. Like, we came across, for an example, that we wanted to make sure that we can create custom lists with student IDs versus emails, because it's a lot quicker to pull a student ID list versus an email list. And what if there's a typo in that email? The student IDs are going to be a lot more consistent. And so that's something that Remind and the district is currently working on developing. So that way, that will be an easy thing going into the next school year. So if there's anything like that, or functionality that you wish you had, or anything, communicate that with us, and then we can work with Remind to see if we can make it happen. So yeah, any other questions? All right.
I have some more.
So they're sharing in the spirit of equity.
They don't have to. We want everybody to have what they need. Hello, I'm Cynthia Richardson, Director of Student Equity Access and Advancement, and I'm here today to share with you the newly developed or created Equity Lens. 2 years ago, we had an equity lens developed by the school board to help them use it in making the decisions that they made for our school district. Many departments, many schools were trying to utilize that tool, but it was not effective in the type of decisions that they needed to make. I meet with a district equity committee once a month, and Superintendent Christy Perry came to us at the beginning of the school year and asked us to vet a more usable equity lens. So what we did was looked at other organizations' equity lens, other school districts' equity lens, and the product you see in front of you today is the product that we ended up with. We think it's very user-friendly, and we think that it can be used in every decision that we need to make regarding our students. And you might say, why do we need an equity lens? If you look at our students and our families, many of them come from different backgrounds and experiences that we do, and we want to make sure that we're including them in the decisions that we make and that we're doing what's best for them. Any questions? The equity lens was used in our bond decision. It was also used in our, we did a presentation for the budget committee as well. And then Kraig is going to share with you the strategic plan for next year and how we use the equity lens to develop that. Thank you.
All right, while Kraig is handing out the strategic plan, I can give you an update on how we landed on this. What's coming around is actually a two-sided document. The first side that's labeled strategic plan is just an overview, a summary of the areas that will be focused on during not just the 1920 school year, but most likely over the next 3-year time period. So this is the 30,000-foot view of what are the action areas, the strategic areas of focus for the district as a whole? So district leadership, who will be informing practices for school-based leadership, who will be informing practices for school-based staff, both teachers and classified. So you'll see that there are 4 areas. There are 3 tiers, and then those lead to a large square box. And that box where it says equitable educational outcomes, that really is our number 1 goal. So how do we ensure that all students master grade level academic and behavioral standards? And so that work is coming alongside our MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support, and the conversations that schools are having about students getting core instruction in the general classroom and receiving intervention as necessary, both academic interventions and or behavioral interventions, and how are we working together to meet the needs of the whole student. So ensuring equitable outcomes is actually goal number 1. Second to that is this concept of inclusive culture and community. So the statement, we will build inclusive environments that empower students and staff to thrive with an intentional focus on those of us currently and historically underserved. You've heard lots about equity. You've heard lots of information about culturally relevant, culturally responsive practices. Those are the types of things that we are continuing to build system-wide. So what does it look like for a student of a different culture to be included and invested and supported in a classroom? What does it look like for our ELs, for our students who are learning English language, and what are the additional supports that they need? How are we welcoming and creating environments that are receptive and welcoming for our LGBTQ students? What are we doing to be inclusive in our culture and our community? So that's goal number 2. You want to hit the last 2?
Sure, and just to add, one thing I really like about that inclusive culture and community focus is that we need to create welcoming and loving communities for our kids, but we also need to create welcoming and loving communities for each other as adults in the system as well. And so the notion of inclusion, I think a lot of times we think, how can we create classrooms? But we need to create school communities that are inclusive to people that come to our school community who might not look like us or might not have the same views as us, but we still are working together for the betterment of kids. So that's one thing I really liked about that inclusive culture. A lot of times we always think it's somewhere else, or it's the kids and the families, but we're a big part of this. We're a big part of this organization. And if we thrive, if we flourish together, we create communities of support that can love up and welcome our kids and families. So that's part of that inclusive culture and community. It's not somebody else, it's us. It's that we benefit from that as well, and we create that as well. So then the second one is around effective systems and operations. And this is the operational side of the house. And so these are our custodial supports, our transportation, TIS, people that all work together to be able to make sure that we can support our students and families. So we want to align those district operations to support equitable student outcomes. And we did a little brainstorming session with our K-12 leadership. So that's every administrator in the district, department heads, and people who work in transportation and student services. And they all wrote theories of actions about how their departments can support student outcomes. And it was actually pretty inspirational to read the way that they think of themselves as custodians, but also educators first, and somebody who can greet kids at the curb first, even though that they may not have that as their official role. So again, effective systems and operations is the second one. And then the last goal area is this idea of building leadership capacity. So we want to create leadership opportunities that build the capacity to achieve equitable student outcomes. And oftentimes people think of leadership as, oh, it's the principal, that's the leadership opportunity, or it might be a select group of teachers, that's the leadership opportunity. But what this notion of collaborative leadership is, we need to all be leaders to be able to establish a vision and enact what we need to enact. And we have so much human capital in our system to be able to really accelerate and to be able to create a safety net that's going to accelerate our system, is we need to capitalize on that leadership in all different work areas, all different groups in the organization. So that's that notion of collaborative leadership. And then if you turn it over on the back, So these are our key performance indicators. Did we show this to you at one point? Did we show this to this group? Okay. We do so many of these. The two of us do so many of these presentations. I can't remember which groups have seen what. So this is our attempt to be able to tell the school district, these are the things we value, and to be able to tell the school board, this is what we want you to hold us accountable to. Because we strongly believe that what you measure communicates what you value in an organization, and these are the things that we're proposing are important to us. So if you look, each of these indicators, it starts with kindergarten and moves all the way through our system, 13 years up to high school graduation, high school completion. That's our ultimate goal. And if you look, there's these little mortar boards, those little graduation hats that people wear. And the mortar boards are the prime indicators that the school district is going to come back and the school board is going to come back on us and say, you said this is an important thing. Did we see growth in this area? So the first one that you can see right there is for strong attendance. And while we think strong attendance throughout the system is important, strong attendance for kindergarten, we believe, is one of the most important data points for us to collect data on. And this was based on some research that we did. So it's not even all of kindergarten. Kind of uniquely, it's September and October. So the habits that are established in September and October are one of the most powerful indicators for 13 years later whether a kid walks on time or not. So those habits that are established, it gives us this unique window of opportunities to really welcome and support families in different ways in September and October if they're new to our system. The research says if you have a sibling, it's not as extreme, because you know how those of you who have had kids and sent them through your very first kid at kindergarten, I remember dropping mine off, my goofy 5-year-old son, dropping him off at kindergarten, and I distinctly remember that experience because it was our first. It was my very first time I even taught, and it was still my first with my own. It really feels different at that time. So we have a unique window right there with our families, and that is going to hold us accountable. 73.7% of our families have regular attendance, which means 27% are chronically attenders in kindergarten. So we can do better than that. We can get that time up. So then if you work your way across, we have early literacy skills in English, and then we have early literacy skills in Spanish as well. And this is just a recognition that in 23 of our elementary schools, we're teaching in both English and Spanish up through the 3rd grade, and up through the 5th grade, transitioning in most of those programs do kids get taught in Spanish. So we want to recognize that Spanish is an asset that our community has. We have lots of kids. 40% of our kids qualify for language services. Most of them speak Spanish. So they come with this huge linguistic asset that we want to make sure that we celebrate and capitalize on as a system. And that's why we teach in both Spanish and English. Then the next category is benchmarks, and these are taken in SBAC. So notice there's a little mortar board there on 3rd and 5th grade English language arts. Most of you have probably heard the key data point that if a student can read by 3rd grade, they have a much higher chance of graduating high school than if they can't. And it's those of you who work in elementary schools, you know that after 3rd grade, instead of learning to read, which is we teach the basics of reading, kids then read to learn. So they read about social studies, they read about science, or they even read about math. So, but if you can't read, it's really hard to interact with those other content areas. So we know that that's a huge data point to be able to get kids to be able to read by 3rd grade. Now, I just said that we value Spanish. That 3rd grade test is only in English. So we also want to recognize that it might take our kids a little bit longer to be able to get proficient in English, which is why we have the mortar board on 5th grade as well. That gives us 6 years. Even kids who are learning in Spanish and English simultaneously, that gives us 6 years to be able to get to that benchmark, to be able to launch them off in middle school successfully. So I'll hand it off to Linda here in a second, but are there any questions? I'm kind of the elementary guy. She's the secondary, woman. So that would make me the elementary man, I guess. Are there any questions on the elementary side of the house that you would have about the document at this point? Okay. Here's the secondary woman.
All right, so staying in that middle column, benchmark reading and math, if you go all the way down to the bottom, you'll see the mortarboard, the graduation cap next to 8th grade, state assessments in mathematics. Statistically, there is a correlation between grades and success in middle school math courses and high school graduation. Specifically, there's a national statistic listed up there in the box. Middle school math. Only 13% of students who fail a math course in middle school will go on to earn a high school diploma. And that was a somewhat shocking statistic, and so we didn't want to share a stat that might be true nationally that wasn't true for us. So our middle school director ran our own numbers. Surely that couldn't be the same for Salem-Keizer, and actually our numbers are a little bit worse. So kids who are not, about 9%. Kids that are not successful in middle school math. So if you fail a math class in middle school, the likelihood of you earning a high school diploma on time is less than 10% of kids who fail math class go on to earn a diploma on time. Brian, will you take a microphone? I think we had a question in the back. Did you have a question? Perfect.
I just want to know if you have the data on what percentage actually fail a middle school class.
That is a great question. I don't have it off the top of my head. Gwen, I'm sorry, I'm putting you on the spot as well. You don't happen to remember off the top of your head the percentage of our students who fail a class in middle school math? No, I know that percentage, but how many of our middle schoolers?
This is the question we had too for Matt.
I don't remember either. Certainly something I can look up and even include in the minutes. I know that we have that data, so that's a really, really good question. That gives you a sense of the scope, the scope of the issue for us. So, moving over a column, the next title is language acquisition. And so this is another interesting data point specific to Salem-Keizer. As we review students going through their educational journey here in Salem-Keizer, those that have received English language services and those who exit those English language services before high school, meaning they developed proficiency somewhere in elementary school or high school, they actually graduate at a rate commensurate and a little bit higher than the general population. So kids who have mastered 2 languages, again, that language-based asset, really perform very, very well in high school, earning diplomas on time. Students that are still in an EL program during their high school career, the percentage of those kids that walk across the stage on time plummets. So, language acquisition is on this sheet as a key performance indicator because we are committed to ensuring that students can demonstrate proficiency in English before they leave 7th grade. So that's going to require us to intervene and to provide supports in a different way than we currently do, but it is no longer acceptable for us to continue to allow students to remain as long-term ELs in program when we know that statistically, if they begin 9th grade still in program, the likelihood of their graduating on time is very low. So language acquisition is something we're committed to, and you'll see that is in fact a mortarboard. It has the graduation cap there indicating it as a priority. Then we move on to freshman success or 9th grade success, what we call 9th grade on track, 9th grade success teams. Those are currently in place at every high school. 9th grade on track is defined by the number of credits completed at the end of the year. So if you have 6 out of your 8 annual credits with no more than 1 F in a core course, we now consider you on track. Fascinating statistic in Salem-Keizer. Our graduation rate never exceeds the 9th grade on track percentage of that same cohort of kids. So we know up to this point, we can be better, but up to this point, the percentage of kids at the end of their freshman year, the percentage of those kids that are on track at the end of 9th grade, we never get a higher percentage of graduation 3 years later when they're seniors. So
the ceiling for our current 9th graders is 87%. It could be lower than that, but
we've never gotten it
higher than that.
And then finally, the last column is where we measure our success, our final outcomes, high school completion. That includes traditional graduation in 4 years. It includes 5-year completers. It includes special populations of students who participate in our CTE programs, and you'll see the increased graduation rates for those kids who are concentrators, as well as the GEDs that were awarded and the seals of biliteracy. So this document defines what we value. It will be a public-facing document so that people on the outside of the district, community members, certainly board members, others who might want to know what are we about, this is what we are about, and this holds us accountable. You'll notice that this is a 17-18 version, so we generated this year based upon outcome data from last year. So this document will look back and will look forward. We will do summative evaluations like this one is for the entire school year, but we also will have some benchmarks and some dipstick tests along the way to ensure, first of all, that we're holding ourselves accountable to the measures that the board has asked us to, but also to ensure that the systems and structures that we have in place are actually being effective in moving kids closer to the graduation stage. So, questions about anything on the key performance indicator page? All right. I know, boom. Stay close because we'll do budget conversation. So, several of you, and maybe not people in this room, but several people submitted budget questions. I know Christy Patton does a great job saying, what do you want to talk about? Several of the questions that came in were quite specific, so I'm going to burst your bubble. Wah, wah. I can't actually give you specifics about the budget prior to the superintendent's budget message. So Superintendent Perry will be presenting that budget message Tuesday night, April 23rd. That will actually be at the Student Services Center in the boardroom. It will look like a traditional board meeting in setup, but the budget committee will be present, and she will give a formal presentation with the particulars of the district budget for 2019-2020. So by statute, we are not allowed to share specifics of the district's budget until the superintendent's budget message rolls out those particulars. So, but I can give you a little bit of information based upon what you may or may not have seen in the newspaper. Well, maybe it's been a week ago now, there was a report released with information on the Joint Committee for Student Success. And that talked about additional dollars that could be released to schools to fund particulars like preschool programs, or Measure 98, which is money specifically targeting career and technical education and dropout prevention, in addition to a pocket of money called the School Improvement Fund. All of that is still up in the air, but the legislature is consistently talking about how to infuse schools with additional dollars targeting, again, dropout prevention, getting kids across the graduation stage ready for college and or career. So the legislature is still working through all of that. Second to that, you may have seen an article or seen the posting from the Oregonian about the potential for PERS reform. Lots of conversations from Governor Brown right now about ways to fill the gap in PERS, and basically the discrepancy in what we're going to owe people as they retire, and as we move forward into not enough people paying in and a lot of people needing to be paid out. So significant $27 billion unfunded actuarial.
17 billion,
but growing. Anyways, don't take the number, but it's a lot of money. It's more money than you or I will ever see. But lots of conversations. I don't know where any of that will land, but I would certainly encourage you to continue to follow that. And the budget that superintendent will be sharing on next Tuesday on the 23rd is not yet able to take any of those things into consideration. That's all still in a legislative package, and so she currently will just be sharing on what right now is the proposed governor's budget. So that's where we are in budgeting for 2019-20. Questions or clarifications? Oh, all right, we have a comment. She's going to wait for the microphone.
I just wanted to also point out that on April 29th, we will be launching Ask 24J, which will be a really great opportunity for if you have any questions after Superintendent Perry's budget message, you will be able to submit questions to the district that will go to district leadership and work on getting addressed. So keep looking out for that in the employee newsletter, the video newsletter, and we'll do posts on Insight 24J as we start launching that. But again, that'll open and launch on April 29th.
Also, I did forget to mention, thanks, Emily, for that. This is a great place to get some questions answered. The superintendent's budget message itself will be recorded and posted online sometime that evening. So if you're at home with a glass of wine and you want to watch the superintendent's budget message sometime on the evening of Tuesday, April 23rd, that will be archived and posted, and you certainly can get all the information there. Have all your questions answered. Nothing else on the budget. Okay, Gwen, will you come share ESP pathways?
Hi, everybody. I'm Gwen Bruey-Finck. I'm our Director of Secondary Curriculum and Instruction, but I also coordinate the what used to be known as the PD office, so Cheryl White and the ATL and all that fun stuff, Title II. And it is time again, now that we're in year 3 or 4 of the pathway. I think we're in year 3 of the pathways. Those of you who among you has taken a ESP pathway before, either this year or before? Awesome. How many of you have been in the district and remember the survey that comes out in the spring about the pathways? Awesome. Okay. Most hands are up for those of you online. So it is time for the interest survey to go out. It's going to go out tomorrow morning, or at least that's the plan. It's a really quick Google survey that asks you about 5 questions, and those questions really generate what topics you would like to see formed into pathways next year. So there's a cluster of topics around instructional technology, another one around supporting diverse learners, another one about teaming and kind of working in a school with other adults, so communication, teaming, those kinds of things. You can check as many topics as you're interested in underneath, because we're just generating the interest to see which classes we're going to pursue. The only other change for next year really is that, as you might know, one of the purposes of ESP Pathways is to go deeper into our learning over an extended period of time. What we had previously 4 or 5 years ago was that every single PD day we did a different thing. So you would take a different class every PD day, which sounds cool, but really in the end what it meant was people were getting really quick touches on a lot of different topics, and the membership at the time really wanted to have deeper learning over fewer topics. What we've learned though now in year 3 is that our attendance over time in these year-long courses really dwindles towards the end of the year. Our end of the year, for example, secondary has 5 touch points, and in our last 2 to 3, kind of starting in January and then March and April, our attendance dwindles down below 40%, which really for our presenters is kind of problematic, especially if you only have about 15 people in the class to begin with. You end up in your last PD with about 3 or 4 or 5 people. So we're going to try something a little new next year. We're going to split our ESP pathways into 2 separate courses. So you can choose a fall topic and a spring topic. That goes for secondary and elementary. So that means if you know that you're not going to be available for the fall in-service days, you can still join in January for elementary or in March for secondary and still get some learning for the year. So we're going to try that next year and see how that goes, if it helps our attendance, and also if people generally find that they're able to meet their needs a little bit better. Are there any questions about ESP pathways? That's probably the first communication group meeting I've ever been to without any questions about ESP pathways. That means we've come a long way, guys. We've come a long way. That's great. There is a question actually in the back. I got it, Brian.
It's not really a question, it's just more of a comment, and this is strictly from the elementary perspective. There are, part of the attendance issue is because more and more of us are getting required to attend mandatory in-school trainings. So it's not that we don't want to attend, it's that we are not allowed to attend So,
Right. So
not a question, a comment.
Yeah, that's a big shift too, is that really what we would love is more and more ESPs to be included and encouraged to attend either their school or department-based PD, because we know that job-embedded PD is the most relevant and the most useful because it's going to be the most tailored to your needs. One of our hopes too, honestly, about the change to kind of two courses instead of one is to provide a little bit more flexibility. Some of our ESP members have been asked to join maybe like an October training with their school, but not the January one. And then you've missed the boat on the ESP pathways. So part of it is to provide a little bit more flexibility too for those of us who are in our schools. We think it's great if your schools are including you in that learning, because it's going to be the most relevant to what you're working on. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we did have one question from the last communication group meeting, and that was specifically around statewide in-service day. And the question was about how previously, and this was way back in the day, if you remember this, you can raise your hand, when the association actually, both the licensed and the classified associations used to plan and implement almost like a conference on statewide in-service day. Who remembers back in the day? Okay, awesome. Yes, some of you were back around when I was here too. So the culture around statewide in-service day at the state level has really changed. It used to be there was a conference, there were tons of conferences going on that day around the state. And as we went into the large recession with the RIFs and the furlough days, that nightmare scenario, statewide in-service day became a furlough day for a lot of districts. And that really undercut all of the organizations who used to give conferences on that day. It just kind of canceled all of them. And lots of those conferences have never come back. So the whole day, as it was added back to not be a furlough day, and I'm talking a lot about the metro area, that's a school-based PD day, where teachers and support staff aren't allowed to go out to conferences anymore. One, because there aren't many offered, and two, because they really regain the culture of that back as a day. Our district has still maintained that day as not a furlough and over time, and we have still allowed teachers specifically to go out to the conferences that do still exist. But it was during all that shifting that the associations, in my understanding, really stopped offering things. One was because of a capacity issue, and two was because of funding. And three, because of the furlough days. So I explain all that because the culture has really changed around statewide in-service. That being said, the question was if the association could start doing that again. And I think the simple answer to that is that's up to the association. If they would like to really spearhead that, I'd be welcome for them to talk to me about it. But that's obviously a piece of advice or a recommendation for the association directly. That being said, we will still try to offer some things on statewide in-service day, as we have. Most of our required trainings is what we offer on that day. So CPR and the things that MANT trainings, things that we need to do, security and safety, stewards of children. We'll still continue to offer those things. So if you have any questions about ESP pathways, please don't hesitate to email me or Cheryl White in our department. And we'll go from there. So keep your eyes peeled for that survey. It'll come out tomorrow, and encourage your staff members to fill it out so we're sure to get the right sessions offered next year.
Thanks. You're welcome. All right, that is everything on the official agenda. So I will let you go early, or I will stay and answer questions if you have them. So any other topics, questions, comments?
So I'd like to go back to the key performance indicators. I just have a question about the freshman success. You're saying if someone has only 75% success that first year, so 6 out of 8, that they still have, good chance of graduating. Is there credit recovery? What happens if the next year they get behind?
Yep. So let me tell you, Salem-Keizer is a very, very unique place in that 8 credits being offered in a high school year is virtually unheard of. So you only need 24 credits to graduate from high school. So if you get 6 out of your 8 every 4 years, you are still on track. So there is, I really can't believe I'm going to say this, there is an acceptable failure rate. I don't actually believe that there is an acceptable failure rate, but there is a cushion between the courses that are offered and the courses that are required. Many, many high schools just offer 6 credits per year, so there is no wiggle room whatsoever. So that's the difference. Anything else? All right, thanks so much for coming. Have a good afternoon.